Edward Benson, a 35-year-old billionaire, once had everything: a booming tech company, luxury cars, a beautiful mansion, and a glamorous wife named Sylvia. But one accident changed everything. While returning from a business meeting, his car skidded off the road during a heavy rainstorm. He survived, but his spinal cord was damaged. He woke up in the hospital to hear the painful words, "You're paralyzed from the waist down." Sylvia, his wife, cried at first, but weeks passed and she changed. The once loving woman began going out at night, posting flashy pictures online and ignoring Edward's cries. "I have a life to live, Edward. I didn't sign up to be a nurse," she said coldly one evening. When Edward begged her to stay, she threatened him, "Then get a maid or I'll file for divorce." Edward had no choice. A job advert was posted for a live-in maid who could cook, clean, and assist with basic care. That was how Grace entered their lives. Grace had never seen such a mansion in her life. She stood at the tall iron gate with her little brown bag, worn shoes, and a heart full of fear. At just 22 years old, Grace had known more pain than joy. Orphaned at age 5 when her parents died in a fire, she had grown up in different homes, passed around like an unwanted parcel. Some families used her for house chores, others beat her for every mistake. She had no siblings, no one to protect her, and no one to call family. The only thing she had was her faith and the hope that one day life would smile at her too. The moment she received the call about the maid job, she didn't think twice. It didn't matter that the house was in the rich part of the city. It didn't matter that she didn't know who the billionaire was. What mattered was the chance to work, to eat, and maybe to finally rest from suffering. The gates opened. A cold-looking man in a black suit walked toward her. "You're the maid?" he asked, looking her up and down like a delivery package. "Yes, sir. My name is Grace." He nodded. "Follow me." As she entered, her jaw dropped. The compound looked like a 5-star hotel. A massive fountain stood in the middle, and 2 luxury cars sparkled under the sun. The main house was a masterpiece. She had only seen such things in movies. The man led her inside. The air smelled of wealth, marble floors, golden curtains, tall mirrors. But something else hung in the air: sadness. The house felt cold, not the kind of cold from an air conditioner, the kind of cold that comes from emptiness. They walked past the living room, up the stairs, and into a quiet hallway. Then they stopped outside a room. "Whatever happens, don't speak unless spoken to," the man warned. "He doesn't like noise." Grace nodded. Her heart was racing. The door opened slowly, and there he was. Edward Benson. He was sitting in a wheelchair, dressed in a simple white shirt and black trousers. His face was pale, his beard unshaved, his eyes empty, but even in that state he looked powerful. His presence filled the room. Grace bowed slightly. "Good afternoon, sir." Edward looked at her. "Leave us," he said to the man. The man exited and closed the door. There was silence for a long while. "You don't look like a nurse," Edward finally said. "I'm not," Grace replied softly. "I'm just here to help with cleaning and cooking." "Are you afraid of me?" She looked up. "No, sir." He raised an eyebrow. "Everyone is." Grace smiled faintly. "I've seen pain, sir. I know what it looks like. You're not someone to be afraid of." For the first time in months, Edward chuckled. Just a small one. He looked at her closely. Something about her felt honest, real, different. "You'll be staying in the back quarters. There's a small room there. My meals must be served on time. The house must stay clean. And don't go around the mansion taking pictures or poking your nose where it doesn't belong." "I understand. If my wife gives you instructions, obey her." Grace nodded again, though something about the mention of the wife made Edward's voice drop. There was pain there. He looked away. "That will be all." Grace left quietly and followed the guard to her tiny room behind the house. It was small but clean. A bed. A fan. A wardrobe. That was more than she'd ever had. She dropped her bag and sat down, letting out a long sigh. Later that evening, she went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. She noticed Sylvia, the wife, sitting in the living room scrolling through her phone. She looked like a model. Long nails, heavy makeup, designer clothes. But the look she gave Grace was full of disgust. "So you're the maid?" she asked. "Yes, Ma," Sylvia hissed. "Make sure you clean the master bedroom twice a day. If I find dust, you're out." "Yes, Ma." "And don't get comfortable. My husband is sick, not stupid. I know how girls like you behave." Grace blinked. "I'm just here to work, Ma." Sylvia didn't respond. She just walked out, slamming the door. Grace swallowed her pride and continued cooking. She had seen women like Sylvia before, proud, empty, and angry. Grace only prayed that she would not stay too long in such a home. She took the food to Edward's room. "I hope it's not too salty," she said with a small smile. Edward looked at the tray. It smelled like home-cooked food. He took a spoonful, paused, and looked at her. "This is actually good." Grace beamed. "Thank you, sir." He looked at her again. "What did you say your name was?" "Grace." He nodded. "You have a kind face, Grace." Her heart softened a bit. "And you have tired eyes, sir." He paused, surprised. "No one has ever said that to me before." "Well, no one has ever looked closely enough," she replied. That night, Grace returned to her room and knelt down beside her bed. "Lord," she prayed, "I don't know why you brought me here, but please, use me, and help Mr. Edward find joy again." She wiped a tear and laid down to sleep. Grace was already sweeping the hallway when Sylvia tiptoed in through the front door at 6 a.m., dressed in a tight red gown with glittering high heels in her hand. Her makeup was smudged and her hair looked like she'd been dancing all night. She didn't notice Grace at first, but when she looked up and saw her, her face twisted in irritation. "What are you staring at?" she snapped. Grace bowed slightly. "Good morning, Ma." Sylvia hissed and walked upstairs without a word. Grace watched her go, a strange feeling in her chest. The madam of the house was returning home at sunrise while her sick husband lay helpless in bed. Something didn't feel right. Later that morning, Edward called Grace to his room. "You're up early," he said as she adjusted his blanket. "I've always been an early bird," she replied. "I like to start work before the sun fully wakes up." He smiled weakly. "I noticed. You're different." Grace was silent for a moment, then gently asked, "Sir, would you like to sit outside today? A little sunlight might help your mood." Edward hesitated. "I haven't gone outside in months." "Maybe it's time to try. I'll push you in the wheelchair, just for a few minutes." After a while, he nodded. "Okay." Grace helped him get dressed, then slowly wheeled him to the backyard garden. The air was fresh, birds chirped, the flowers danced in the breeze. Edward closed his eyes. "I forgot how fresh air feels." "You've been trapped inside for too long," Grace said softly. "Even a tree needs sunlight to grow." Edward looked at her. "You speak like someone who's read a lot." Grace smiled. "I never went to school properly, but I read anything I find. Books saved me from many lonely nights." For the next hour they talked. Not about pain, not about sickness, just simple things. Flowers, books, dreams. Grace was the first person in a long time who treated Edward like a human being and not just a broken body. But their moment was cut short when Sylvia's voice rang through the garden. "What is going on here?" She stood by the doorway, her arms crossed, eyes burning. Grace stood quickly. "We were just getting some fresh air, Ma." Sylvia walked up to them and glared at Edward. "You didn't ask me before going outside." Edward frowned. "Sylvia, I don't need your permission to get sunlight." Sylvia turned to Grace. "Go back inside." Grace quietly wheeled Edward toward the door, saying nothing. That evening, Edward confronted Sylvia in their bedroom. "Where were you last night?" Sylvia rolled her eyes. "Out. You're not my father, Edward. I'm your husband." "A husband who can't even walk," she said with a bitter laugh. "Do you know what it feels like to be stuck with a man who used to be a lion, but is now just a shadow?" Edward's heart broke. "You said you loved me." "I loved the powerful man you used to be. Now I feel like a prisoner. I have my life to live. I won't waste my youth changing diapers and pushing wheelchairs." He stared at her. "So that's it? You've moved on?" She leaned closer, her voice cold. "I've been moved on. I only stayed because of one thing." Tears filled Edward's eyes. "Then why don't you just leave?" "Because I want everything that comes with this marriage. The house, the cars, the luxury. If you're not careful, you'll lose it all." Sylvia laughed. You? What can you do in that wheelchair? Threaten me with your pity. Edward turned away, broken. Outside the room, Grace had heard part of the argument. Her heart was heavy. She returned to the kitchen and sat quietly, wiping her eyes. She didn't know why, but Edward's pain felt personal. The next day, Sylvia called for Grace. Take this dress to the dry cleaners and come straight back, and don't try anything funny. Grace nodded and left with the dress. On her way back, she stopped by a small pharmacy to buy antiseptic for a wound on her hand. While waiting in line, she overheard two women chatting. Did you see Mrs. Benson at the club again last night? One said. Yes, and guess what? She came with that tall man. What's his name? Derek. The one with the tattoo. That one? But she's married. They say her husband can't walk. What's she supposed to do? Grace felt her heart sink. So it was true. Sylvia was seeing another man. Back at the mansion, she served Edward his lunch. He barely touched the food. Sir, would you like something else? He shook his head. My appetite is gone. She sat across from him, gently. Sir, life doesn't end in a wheelchair. He looked at her. How do you stay so hopeful, Grace? I've lost everything before. Parents, home, dignity. But each day I'm alive is a chance to start again. Edward sighed. You're stronger than you look. And you're more than your legs, sir. You still have a brain, a heart, a voice. Use them. That night Edward couldn't sleep. Grace's words echoed in his mind. He stared at the ceiling, remembering who he used to be. A fighter, a builder, a man who overcame storms. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to rise again, even from a chair. 3 days passed quietly in the Benson mansion, but peace was far from the hearts of those inside. Grace continued her duties without complaint, sweeping, cleaning, helping Edward to the bathroom, cooking warm meals, and sometimes just sitting quietly by his side. She had never known luxury, yet she never acted impressed by it. She was focused, grateful, humble. Edward, on the other hand, was changing, little by little. He started requesting to sit outside more often. He asked Grace to bring him newspapers. One afternoon, he even asked her to help him sit at his home office desk just to feel it again. You can't type, she said kindly. Then I'll think, he replied, maybe even dream again. Grace smiled. There was life coming back to the man who had once given up. But one evening changed everything. It was almost 9 p.m. The house was quiet. Grace had just finished washing the dishes when she noticed Sylvia walk past the kitchen, dressed in a tight black gown, glittering heels and red lipstick. Her perfume filled the air. Grace stepped forward. Ma, should I pack dinner for you? Sylvia turned sharply. Who asked you to talk to me? I was only... Sylvia raised a hand. Mind your business, orphan. Grace lowered her head. Sorry, Ma. Sylvia rolled her eyes and walked out. Grace looked through the window and watched as Sylvia got into a black car that pulled up just outside the gate. Inside was a man, tall, muscular, with dreadlocks and a tattoo on his neck. Grace's heart raced. That must be the Derek they spoke about at the pharmacy. She ran to Edward's room. Sir, I'm sorry, I don't mean to bother you, but I think there's something you should see. Edward looked at her, confused. What is it? I think your wife is going out again. With someone. Edward's eyes narrowed. Are you sure? Grace hesitated. I saw the car. It wasn't a taxi. The man looked familiar. Edward was quiet. Grace continued softly. I didn't want to say anything before, but I heard two women talking about her at the pharmacy. They said she's been going out with a man named Derek. They've seen her at the club, almost every night. Edward clenched his fist. Bring me my phone. Grace brought it quickly. Edward opened the security app. His tech company had built it. It allowed him to check all CCTV cameras in and around the house. He clicked on the front gate footage. There she was. Sylvia, blowing a kiss to the man in the car, and then the car sped off. Edward stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't say a word. His lips tightened. His face turned pale. Sir, Grace began. He lifted a hand. Thank you, Grace. That'll be all. Grace bowed and left the room, her heart pounding. Edward didn't sleep that night. He stayed by the window, his mind in turmoil. The woman he married, the one he gave everything to, was not just careless. She was cheating on him, boldly and proudly. And she had the audacity to live in his house, eat his food, and mock his condition. Anger burned in his chest, but beneath the anger was pain. So much pain. He thought back to the night of the accident. Sylvia had cried in the hospital. She held his hand and said, "We'll get through this, baby. I'll never leave you." But those words had been empty. She had left him, not physically but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. She had left him the moment he could no longer stand on his feet. I may be in a chair, Edward thought, but I'm still the man who built an empire from scratch. I still have a mind. A heart. I still have power. The next morning, he asked Grace to wheel him to his study. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked gently. "I'm more than okay," he said. "I'm awake." Inside the study, he picked up his iPad, connected it to his wireless keyboard, and began typing slowly, one letter at a time. Grace watched silently, amazed. Hours passed. Edward didn't eat. He didn't speak. At noon, his lawyer arrived, a smart-looking man in a grey suit. "Mr. Benson," the lawyer said, "I came as quickly as I could." "Sit down," Edward said. "We need to talk about my will. And my marriage." Grace stood in a corner, pretending not to listen. "I want everything changed," Edward said. "If I die, Sylvia gets nothing. Not the house, not the company shares, not the cars. Nothing." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Understood. And I want you to begin drafting a divorce plan, quietly." "Yes, sir." Grace watched as Edward gave the instructions with calm strength. This wasn't the broken man she had met 2 weeks ago. This was Edward Benson, the lion who was learning how to roar again. That night, Sylvia returned home drunk. She didn't notice Edward waiting for her in the hallway. "Had a good night?" he asked coldly. She jumped. What are you doing here?" "I wanted to stretch my legs," he replied sarcastically. "Though that's something you wouldn't understand," Sylvia hissed. "So now you want to monitor my movements?" "I've been watching everything, Sylvia." Her eyes widened. He rolled forward. "Derek, right? Tattoo on the neck, drives a black car." She gasped. "You don't even hide it anymore. You walk out like a queen, forgetting that this is my kingdom, my house, my name." Sylvia fumbled. "Edward, He raised a hand. "Don't insult me with lies. From today, I am not your weak husband. I've already spoken to my lawyer. If you want to leave, leave, but you'll walk away with nothing." Sylvia screamed. "You can't do this." "I can, and I just did." She lunged forward to slap him, but Grace stepped between them. "Don't," Grace said quietly, looking Sylvia in the eyes. "Don't lower yourself further." Sylvia froze. Then, with a bitter laugh, she turned and stormed off. Edward looked at Grace, his eyes red. "I'm sorry you had to see that." Grace shook her head. "I'm just glad you finally stood up, even without your legs." He smiled faintly. Sylvia was in her husband's room. She knelt down beside his wheelchair, crying, holding his hand tightly. "Edward, please." "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I know I messed up. I've changed. I swear I've changed. Please don't leave me." Edward didn't say a word. Sylvia continued, "That guy you saw me with, he's my cousin. I forgot to introduce him to you properly. It was just a misunderstanding. The devil is trying to ruin our marriage, baby. Please, don't fall for it." She cried harder, shaking her head. "I've been so foolish. I didn't realize what I had until I almost lost it. You are my husband. I still love you. Please, Edward, please forgive me. Let us start over. I will do better." "I promise." Edward looked at her for a long moment. Then he said calmly, "I'll tell my lawyer to hold on. But listen to me carefully. I will observe you for a while. If you don't change, Sylvia, you're out of my house." Sylvia wiped her tears quickly and smiled. "Thank you, baby. Thank you. I won't disappoint you." She kissed his hand, stood up, and walked out of the room. But the moment she stepped into the hallway, her expression changed. She walked quickly to her room, shut the door, and burst into quiet laughter. "This man thinks I have time for him," she said to herself. "This man thinks I have time for him," she said to her reflection. "He'll regret ever doubting me. I'll deal with him slowly. He has no idea what I'm capable of." Later that evening, Edward was in his study when Grace entered with his dinner. "Thank you, Grace," he said softly. "Please sit." She sat across from him. "My wife came to me again," Edward began. Grace looked at him. "What did she say this time?" "She begged me, said she had changed. Claimed the man I saw her with is her cousin. Said the devil was trying to ruin our marriage." Grace blinked. "Do you believe her, sir?" Edward sighed. "Number. But I told her I'll observe her for a while." Grace nodded slowly. "I still don't trust her," Edward added. "That's why I want you to help me." Grace frowned. "How, sir?" "Help me put a close eye on her. I want to know what she's doing behind my back." Grace hesitated. "Sir, do you think this is a great idea?" Edward looked at her. "I know what I'm doing." She was silent for a moment, then spoke gently. "Sir, instead of focusing so much on her, why don't you focus on yourself? You've been sitting in this wheelchair for too long. Start exercising again, even small movements. It might help your healing." Edward looked at her for a long time, then his voice softened. "Grace." "Yes, sir?" "I love you." She blinked. "Sir, what did you say?" "You heard me," Edward said, his voice steady. "I love you, Grace. From the first day you came here. You've been the light in this house. You've helped me more than anyone." Grace looked down, shocked. "Sir, I think you're stressed," she said quickly. "You need to relax, please." "I've never been more serious," Edward replied. She stood up gently, avoiding his eyes. "Sir, please, don't say things that can't happen. You're still married, and I'm just your maid." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked quietly out of the room. Edward sat alone in silence, staring at the door where she disappeared. His heart was full. Sylvia sat on the living room couch, her legs crossed, scrolling through her phone with a smirk on her face. When she heard Grace passing by, she called out gently, "Grace?" Grace stopped. "Yes, Ma." "Come and sit with me. I want to talk to you." Grace hesitated, but obeyed. She sat at the edge of the sofa, hands folded on her lap. Sylvia smiled sweetly. "Tell me something. Do you want to further your education?" Grace looked surprised. "Yes, Ma. I would love to go to the university. It has always been my dream." Sylvia leaned closer. "How would you feel if I helped you travel abroad for your education?" Grace gasped. "Really? You would do that for me?" "Of course," Sylvia said with a fake smile. "You'll attend a good public school there. Life will be better for you. You deserve more than just cleaning this big house every day." Grace's heart jumped. "Thank you, Ma. But yet may I ask, why are you saying all this?" Sylvia's smile slowly faded. Her eyes turned serious. "I need you to do something for me," she said in a low voice. Grace blinked. "What is it, Ma?" Sylvia looked around, then pulled out a small white packet from her handbag. She placed it gently in Grace's palm. "Put this in my husband's food." Grace looked down at the powder, then up at Sylvia, confused. "Ma, what is this?" Sylvia leaned back. "It's just something to help him get better. He needs to relax more. I'm trying to help him." "Why don't you give it to him yourself, Ma?" Grace asked softly. Sylvia's smile vanished completely. Her voice turned sharp. "Don't be foolish. My husband doesn't like taking medicine. He'll throw it away if he sees it. Can't you get that, you dumb village girl?" Grace's mouth opened slightly, stunned by the insult. I'm sorry, Ma," she said, "but I can't take this. I can't do it." Sylvia stood quickly. Her eyes were wide with anger. "You have no choice." Grace stood too, her hands trembling. "Please, Ma, don't make me do this." Sylvia leaned in close, her voice cold and low. "If you don't do as I say, I will make you disappear. And if you tell my husband anything, I swear, you are gone." Grace stepped back slowly, her eyes wide with fear. I'll think about it, Ma," she said in a shaky voice. Sylvia smiled again, slowly, like a snake. "That's more like it." Grace hurried back to her room, closed the door, and dropped to the floor. Her hands were shaking. The white packet still sat in her palm like a curse. Tears filled her eyes. "What do I do now?" she whispered. "If I tell the truth, she might hurt me. If I stay silent, I'll be part of something evil." She held the packet tightly in her fist. "I need to think. I need to be smart. Grace didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her small bed, the white packet still on the table beside her. The words Sylvia spoke kept repeating in her head. If you don't do it, I will make you disappear. If you tell my husband, you are gone. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, not from cold but from fear. She stood, walked over to the mirror and stared at her reflection. Her eyes were tired, her heart heavy. God, please help me, she whispered. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I'm scared. Suddenly, she had an idea. The next morning, she took the packet and wrapped it in a tissue. She placed it inside a small envelope and hid it deep in her handbag. She cleaned the house as usual, acting normal, pretending like nothing was wrong. When she brought Edward his breakfast, she stood quietly by the door after setting the tray down. Edward looked up. Is everything all right, Grace? She opened her mouth, then quickly shut it. He raised an eyebrow. You're not your usual self today. She forced a smile. I'm okay, sir. He studied her face for a moment, then said gently, You can talk to me, Grace. I told you. You're not just a maid in this house. Her lips trembled. Sir, can we go for a walk later, in the garden? Edward nodded. Of course. After breakfast, she wheeled him out to the garden where the morning sun was soft and the air felt peaceful. She sat beside him on the bench and looked straight ahead. There's something I need to tell you, she said quietly. Edward looked at her. But I'm scared, she added. He reached for her hand. Nothing will happen to you, Grace. I promise. I'm here. She took a deep breath. Yesterday, your wife called me into the living room. She asked me if I wanted to go abroad to study. She said she could help me go to school. Edward nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. Then she gave me something, Grace continued, a small packet. She said I should put it in your food. Edward's face darkened. What? She said it was to help you feel better. When I asked her why she couldn't give it to you herself, she insulted me, called me dumb, then she threatened me, said if I didn't do it or if I told you, I'd disappear. Edward's hands curled into fists on his lap. Grace quickly pulled out the envelope from her bag and handed it to him. This is it. He opened it and saw the packet still sealed. She said it was medicine, Grace said, but I was scared. I didn't want to do something wrong. Edward stared at the packet, his chest rising and falling slowly. Thank you, he said in a low voice, for telling me. Grace looked down. I didn't know what to do, but I couldn't hurt you, sir. I just couldn't. Edward turned to her. You've just confirmed everything I've been suspecting. She doesn't care about me. She never did. He looked away, pain in his eyes. This isn't just betrayal. This is evil. I'm sorry, Grace whispered. No, he said. You did the right thing, and now it's time I do something too. Later that day, Edward called his lawyer. I want the divorce papers ready, he said firmly. I'm done playing games. He also sent the packet to the lab through his personal assistant, asking for urgent results. By evening, the results returned. It wasn't medicine, it was a slow poison, something that could weaken his organs quietly over time. Edward's blood ran cold. He didn't call for Sylvia. He didn't scream or fight. He sat quietly, thinking. The next morning, he told Grace, I need you to be careful. Sylvia may suspect something. Act normal. Say nothing. I'll handle this. Grace nodded, though her heart was racing. Later that day, Sylvia walked into the kitchen while Grace was washing dishes. So, she said with a sly smile, did he eat it? Grace paused for a second, then smiled weakly. Yes, Ma. Sylvia laughed softly. Good girl. You may just earn that ticket abroad. Grace forced a laugh. Thank you, Ma. But inside she was praying, Lord, protect me. Don't let her know. That night, as Sylvia celebrated her success with a glass of wine in her room, Edward was on the phone with a private investigator and his lawyer. He had everything he needed. The next morning was quiet in the Benson mansion. Sylvia walked around with pride in her steps, humming to herself, feeling like she had finally won. Edward hadn't confronted her. Grace was acting normal. To her, everything was going perfectly. She walked past the dining area and saw Edward quietly reading a newspaper. He didn't even look up. She smiled smugly and walked to the kitchen. "Grace," she called, "make something special for dinner tonight. I feel like celebrating." Grace nodded. "Yes, Ma." But behind her calm reply, her heart was pounding. She knew something was about to happen. Edward had asked her to be silent and act normal, but she could feel it. Today would not end like every other day. At exactly 4 p.m., the mansion doorbell rang. Grace peeked from the kitchen and saw two men in suits enter the house. One of them was Edward's lawyer. The other was the investigator. Sylvia came downstairs with a curious look. "Who are these people?" she asked. Edward rolled his wheelchair forward calmly. "Sit down, Sylvia." She frowned. "Why should I? What's going on?" "Sit," he repeated, his voice sharp this time. Edward looked at the investigator. "Please, go ahead." The man opened a folder and pulled out photos, images of Sylvia meeting with Derek in his car, at restaurants and at nightclubs. He placed them on the table one by one. Sylvia's eyes widened. "What's all this? Are you spying on me?" Edward didn't flinch. "Keep watching." The investigator then brought out a document from the lab. "This," he said, "is the result of the powder you asked Grace to put in your husband's food. It's not medicine. It's poison." Sylvia jumped up. "That's a lie. She's lying." Edward raised his voice for the first time. "Sit down." Sylvia froze. "I trusted you," Edward said bitterly. "I gave you everything. You mocked me. You cheated on me. You tried to destroy me quietly." "It's not true," she screamed. "She's lying. That girl is evil. She wants to ruin our marriage." The lawyer placed a thick envelope on the table. "These are your divorce papers. Mr. Benson has already signed them." Sylvia's knees went weak. "No, no." "Edward, please, I was desperate. I made mistakes, but it was never meant to go this far. Please forgive me." Edward turned away. "I forgave you the first time. You used my forgiveness to sharpen your knife. You wanted to kill me, Sylvia." Tears streamed down her face. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do." "I gave you a choice," Edward said coldly. "You chose betrayal." She fell to the floor, sobbing. "Don't leave me. Please, I'll do anything. I'll change for real this time." Edward looked at her with pain in his eyes. "It's too late." The lawyer stood. "You have 48 hours to leave this house." The investigator packed up the documents and walked out. Sylvia slowly stood up, wiping her face. She looked at Grace, who was standing silently by the kitchen door. "This is your fault," she shouted. "You wicked orphan. I helped you. I wanted to take you abroad." Grace didn't speak. She just looked at her calmly. Sylvia stormed out of the room. 2 days later, Sylvia left the mansion quietly, her bags packed and her face covered with shame. Later that evening, Grace was setting the table when Edward called her softly. "Grace," he said, "come sit." She sat quietly beside him. "It's over," he said. "She's gone." "I know," Grace said gently. He turned to look at her. "Thank you." She shook her head. "You don't need to thank me, sir. You just needed someone to tell you the truth." He smiled. "You've been more than someone. You've been everything." Grace looked down shyly. "I still mean what I said before," Edward added. "But I'm not rushing you. I just want you to know. I'm free now, and my heart is open." Meanwhile, Sylvia got to her boyfriend's house, the same house she secretly built with him using her husband's money. She knocked angrily. Derek opened the door, shirtless, holding a drink. He looked surprised. "What are you doing here this early?" Sylvia pushed past him and walked inside. "This is my house, remember?" He shut the door and followed her. "Relax, why are you shouting?" "I'm done pretending. I'm done playing wife. They kicked me out." Derek, her boyfriend, sat on the couch looking confused. "What happened this time?" Sylvia pointed her finger at him. "Edward caught everything. He knows you're not my cousin. He knows we've been meeting. He even found out I gave Grace something to put in his food." Derek stood up slowly. "Wait, you mean he knows everything?" "Yes," she shouted. "That useless orphan maid exposed me. I should have dealt with her earlier. Now she's walking around the house like a queen." Derek clenched his jaw. "So now you're homeless?" Sylvia nodded. "He gave me 48 hours. I've left. I have nothing, and it's all because of that stupid maid." Derek looked at her carefully. "You said her name is Grace?" "Yes. And she's living there now?" Yes, Sylvia hissed, and I think Edward is in love with her. That's the worst part. He trusts her, believes her. She began to pace the room. Everything I worked for, gone, all because of her. She was feeding him with lies. Derek sat back, his eyes dark with anger. I see, you gave him your youth, and now he's chasing after some poor village girl. Sylvia nodded. Exactly. He has forgotten who was with him before the accident. Derek was quiet for a moment, then he picked up his phone and made a call. Yo, he said, I need a job done. Yes, tonight. No delays. Sylvia froze and looked at him. How much? The voice on the phone asked. Derek said, whatever it costs. I'll pay. He ended the call and smiled coldly at Sylvia. It's time to end this, he said. Since Edward and that Grace girl think they've won, we'll show them what real pain looks like. Sylvia's eyes lit up. You mean? They'll disappear, Derek said. Both of them. Gone. Sylvia smiled wickedly. I can't wait to hear the news that they're gone forever. She laughed loudly, tossing her heels onto the floor. Useless people. Let them feel what I've felt. Derek handed her a drink. Don't worry, I've called the right guys. They don't leave witnesses. Sylvia raised her glass. To revenge. That night, while Edward was reading in his room and Grace was cleaning up the kitchen, 3 black motorcycles stopped quietly down the road near the mansion. 3 men wearing black clothes and masks stepped off. One of them whispered, "That's the house. We go in, take them out, and disappear. No sound, no mistakes." They brought out long weapons, checked their pockets, and began moving quietly toward the side gate. Inside the house, Grace heard a soft click near the back window. She stopped. Her heart began to beat faster. Something didn't feel right. She turned off the kitchen light and tiptoed toward Edward's room. "Sir," she whispered. He looked up. "Grace? What's wrong?" "I think someone's outside." Edward wheeled himself toward the control panel beside his bed. He opened the CCTV app on his tablet. What he saw made his heart stop. 3 masked men climbing the back wall. He pressed the alarm button immediately. "Stay close to me," he said. "Don't panic." Suddenly, the security alarm went off, loud and sharp. The intruders froze. The lights outside the mansion flashed. Edward's head of security, who lived 2 houses down, received the silent alert and grabbed his weapon. Within minutes, he and 2 armed guards arrived at the gate. The intruders tried to run, but were cornered. "Freeze!" shouted the guard. One of them jumped the wall but was shot in the leg. The others dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Police were called. Inside, Grace stood shaking. Edward held her hand. "It's okay. You're safe now." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Who would do this to us? Edward already knew. The police arrived and arrested the intruders. After hours of questioning, one of them broke down. "We were sent by a man named Derek. He paid us to attack a man in a wheelchair and his maid." Edward sat quietly as the officer read out the report. "And Derek?" Edward asked. "We're going after him next." Sylvia and Derek sat silently in the courtroom, handcuffed and wearing dull prison clothes. The once proud woman who wore diamonds and designer gowns now looked pale, tired and broken. Derek sat beside her, head low, avoiding her eyes. Edward was there too, seated at the back with Grace beside him. He wore a black suit and sat in his wheelchair, looking calm. Grace held his hand gently, offering silent support. The judge entered. "All rise." Everyone stood, then the judge sat down and the courtroom settled. The prosecutor stood and began reading. After several weeks of investigation, it has been confirmed that the accused, Sylvia Benson and Derek Okoye, conspired to harm Mr. Edward Benson and his employee, Ms. Grace Ikenna. Evidence includes recorded calls, paid transactions, CCTV footage, and a lab report confirming an attempt to poison Mr. Benson. He turned to the judge. "These are not just careless acts. They are calculated crimes. We ask this honorable court to give them the punishment they deserve." Sylvia stood quickly. "Your Honor, I was deceived. I didn't know the powder was poison. It was Derek who gave it to me. He used me." Derek jumped up. "She's lying. She's the one who said we should get rid of Edward. She's the one who gave me the money." "Silence," the judge commanded. Both sat down immediately. The judge looked through the case file, then spoke slowly. After careful consideration, this court finds both accused guilty of conspiracy, attempted murder, and unlawful possession of harmful substances. Sylvia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Derek leaned back in defeat. This court hereby sentences Sylvia Benson to 10 years in prison, the judge declared, and Derek Okoye to 12 years. Gasps echoed around the room. Sylvia burst into tears. "Please, no, I can't go to prison. I was rich, I was loved. Please." Two officers grabbed her arms and began to drag her out. "You should have thought about that before you betrayed your husband," one of them muttered. Derek said nothing. He just walked away silently with his head down. It had been 3 weeks since the court sentenced Sylvia and Derek. The mansion was quiet now, peaceful. No more drama, no more fear, just laughter, healing, and the sound of hope returning to every corner of the house. Grace was in the garden, watering the flowers, when Edward wheeled himself out. He looked stronger these days, more confident. His eyes were brighter, and he smiled more often. "Grace," he called gently. She turned and smiled. "Yes, sir?" "Come sit with me." She dried her hands and walked over to the bench, sitting quietly beside him. He looked at her and took a deep breath. "I've been meaning to say something important." Grace looked at him curiously. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and brought out a small, beautiful box. He opened it slowly. Inside was a stunning gold ring with a simple diamond, elegant and beautiful. Grace gasped. "Grace Ikenna," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You walked into my life when I was at my lowest. You fed me, helped me, believed in me. You showed me love when I felt like I didn't deserve any. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Grace's eyes. Her hands flew to her mouth. "Sir." "Don't call me sir," he whispered with a smile. "Call me Edward." She laughed softly through her tears. "Yes, Edward. Yes, I will marry you." He looked at her gently. "Do you love me?" Grace nodded quickly. "I've loved you for a long time. But I was afraid. I didn't think you'd ever feel the same." Edward smiled. Then, to her shock, he stood up. Grace jumped back, eyes wide. "Edward? You're walking?" He laughed. "Yes." She stood too, unable to believe it. "But how?" "When? You couldn't even stand a few weeks ago." He held her hands and looked into her eyes. "Grace, I could walk months ago, but I told no one." She froze. "What? Why?" Edward sighed. "Back then, I started hearing things. People came to me secretly. They said Sylvia was cheating, that she was meeting men, spending my money recklessly. I didn't want to believe it. But the stories kept coming." Grace stared at him in shock. "I asked my private doctor to lie," he continued. "I told him to tell Sylvia that I would never walk again. I needed to test her. I needed to see if she truly loved me, or if she loved my money." Grace placed her hand over her chest. "You were pretending?" Edward nodded. "Every day. I watched, I listened, and in that pain, God sent you to me." Grace smiled through her tears. "I don't know what to say." He looked at her, smiling. "Say you'll be my wife, not just because I can walk again, but because you love me, and I love you." "I will," she said, her voice soft. "I'll marry you, Edward. Today, tomorrow, always." Weeks later, Edward and Grace stood before a small crowd in the beautiful garden behind the mansion. The flowers bloomed like never before. The sun shined gently, and everyone was smiling. Grace wore a simple white gown, glowing like a queen. Edward stood tall in a fine grey suit, looking proud and joyful. "I do," Grace said. "I do," Edward replied. They kissed gently to loud cheers and laughter, from an orphan maid to a beloved bride. Grace's life had changed forever, and Edward. He found love not in wealth, but in honesty, simplicity, and truth. Together they lived happily ever after. Dear viewers, what lessons did you take away from this dramatic tale? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.